Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater. MOTSterpiece Theater.
Good evening, and welcome to a special horror episode of MOTSterpiece Theater.
Horror.
Tonight we are reviewing Alfred Hitchcock's fantastic work, Psycho.
Horror.
So, Scott. Oh, actually, I forgot to introduce people. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Rich Perry,
Good evening.
Stephen Ramosi,
I'm also here.
and Scott Thurlow.
I'm Scott Thurlow, and also my dead mother.
And as I was saying, Scott, would you like to give the funny logline?
Yes, which is similar to my logline is Marion in this movie gets murdered deader than Norman Bates' dead mother. That's pretty much the plot.
Okay, and speaking of plot, Rich, would you like to continue with intro, body, and conclusion?
Sure. We start off with Marion establishing her relationship with her boyfriend who's going through some rough times with his ex-wife. And she sees an opportunity to steal 40 grand from an overly friendly Texan who's trying to buy some new real estate. And she hops in her car, drives straight for where her boyfriend lives. So she stops off at a motel where she meets Norman, who becomes very infatuated with her and then, of course, has to murder her for it.
Obviously.
As you do.
Clearly.
And then eventually, a week later, people have realized that she ran off with the money and her sister has come looking for her, and her last stop is where she assumes that Marion went to go see her boyfriend, and together with a PI named Arbogast, they decide to...
Arbogast.
Or they look deeper into her disappearance and find out that Norman may not be who he seems.
Or more than meets the eye.
Or more than he's a transformer. But
Yes.
but eventually they discover that he has been committing murders under the assumed identity of his mother, where they catch him in the act, reveal the charade, and a psychiatrist explains to them.
Psychiatrist explains it all.
Yeah, explains the whole events of the movie for anybody who didn't pick up for it.
That's what I was going for.
During the course of the movie, and his mother's personality fully takes over.
I mean, the psychiatrist has a Columbo moment at the end.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's well said. I like that.
He was gearing up a lot during that. You could tell that he was going through that speech in stages where he's getting more and more animated. He's like, I've got their attention. Time to bring it home.
Now I know.
I'll say this way: it was a Dan Brown speech before Dan Brown even conceived of writing a novel. But anyway, yep, that's pretty much happened. So
I have to, if I may, I have to give this movie full credit. It's a movie that I think we've all seen before, and a movie that we've probably seen multiple times before. So we were, and I know we've said this on several movies recently. Perhaps this is something that you do when you review movies a lot. But like we were watching this movie again tonight, and we were doing a little Mystery Science Theater 3000,
as we do,
as we tend to do with movies that we've seen before, specifically when we've seen them a bunch of times. But there were definitely scenes where we stopped and said, "Oh, holy shit, that was an incredible!" Like the cinematography in that scene was great, or the acting in that scene was great, and this movie, like for whatever reason, Hitchcock tends to bring out the best in a scene or in his actors, and that's definitely the case in this movie a lot of times, and it's very obvious. you know,
It shows. Yeah.
Norman Bates, the guy who plays Norman Bates, the actor who plays Norman Bates,
Anthony Perkins.
is incredible. Anthony Perkins is incredible in this, and also all the other actors are really good at playing their parts.
For sure.
And
the dialogue is,
and it adds to the intro and the body and the conclusion. Everything gets you from the start. And honestly, the intro might not have gotten me. I might have given this a 2, if not. Let me say this: giving this anything less than a 3 was never a thought in my mind, but probably only because of the incredible soundtrack and music that adds to
Every scene.
the plot and makes the action real and and feel important. And normally normally that's something that I'll wait for Style to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in terms of this movie,
Yeah, you should mention it here.
it's worth a mention right in the beginning.
Well, I will say to your first point you made, this movie shut us up at points.
Yep.
And if you haven't got the feeling for the people we are, the people who have 200 hours of talking on the internet, very few things shut us up. So
It's few and far between.
yeah, good for that. But this movie has 3 distinct acts to it, and actually coming in with more of a thought to paying attention to narrative. Hitchcock, quite quickly in the introduction, sets up motivation, stakes for the main characters.
Every narrative element you need is set up very quickly.
The body is incredibly tense, and Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins working off each other is perfect. It was really well done.
So good. And much less time than I thought they actually had.
Yep.
Which is is good.
Well, then you remembered, and we all commented upon that.
It feels like it's much longer. It feels like they talked for much longer, and that's an amazing thing as far as remembering this movie goes.
And then I know it was shocking back in the day when this was they kill off the main character halfway through the movie.
What you think the main character is going to be, sure.
And the third act is, in a sense, an investigation, but not in what we view in cop dramas to be nowadays.
Yeah.
It felt more. It did feel more slapdash and organic, which really worked for me, because where a horror movie would get boring at a part, or a slasher film would have, they added an element to this. Oddly enough, the original slasher film was more creative than its latter derivatives.
And everything that came from it, yeah.
So I have to say, it's such a surprising, and it's still fresh today, the way the narrative is set up.
I got 2 words for you guys. Perfect pacing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that pretty much says it all. As you said, it has distinct 3 acts, but they flow seamlessly throughout into each other, and all wraps up. It's bookended perfectly. It's exactly the story it needs to be, and Hitchcock was known and influential as a genius, I would say, for a reason, and I'm going to give it a 3 because of that fact. As you said, we had a quick discussion precast that some influential movies you can watch nowadays and say, okay, I see why they're influential, even though the movie itself doesn't hold up. This one absolutely does.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give it a 3 because of that.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm hard-pressed to remember a movie that has taken such a left turn as far as narrative goes, where you think you're watching something completely different, and then you're reminded that, oh, this is supposed to be a horror movie. Right at that famous scene.
In a way, it takes the last girl trope and twists it, but before the trope even existed.
Yep, exactly.
And
Yeah.
It predates that trope, in fact.
So, strangely enough, this reminds me of, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, but, this reminds me of the first movie, and this predates the movie that I'm about to talk about, but, this reminds me of the first movie that I saw that, gave me a, hard, sharp left turn in the middle of the movie, which was From Dusk Till Dawn.
Mm.
And, I feel like From Dusk Till Dawn,
took a cue.
Quentin Tarantino and Rodriguez were, I guarantee, very big
Yes,
Hitchcock supporter, like, you know, not necessarily supporters, but like fans, and like they took a lot of influence from that. And the fact that that movie makes that hard left turn, I think they were given license to do that by this movie.
Sure.
And like, I just love how this movie does it. Takes what you thought this movie, what you thought it was going to be, and just says, nope. Nope. No, I don't think so.
Plays with the conventions and your expectations.
And goes...
But it plays with the conventions before the conventions existed.
Exactly.
And that's what's so impressive about this work and timeless about this work.
You're right. That's the last thing I'm going to say. It both invented and then subverted its own conventions.
Yes.
So, I think that's the best evidence for giving the whole narrative.
So,
a 3.
I think it's 3s all around, right?
It's a strong 3.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Stephen, on to themes.
Themes in this movie are very interesting, I think. Right? So there's the whole mental illness theme that's very strong throughout, after you know what the twist is in this film. And knowing what the twist is in this film, and like watching Norman in his strange behavior
personas.
is great, because you don't actually see his behavior as all that strange at first until
he seems eccentric,
until
but
you
not,
start noticing exactly. You start noticing little things throughout. And like, it's, you talked about pacing earlier, Scott. His revealing how deranged he is paced very well in this film. I think
it's parceled out.
At first, he seems like a kind of a normal guy who's like just having a normal conversation with somebody who has come to his hotel, and he reveals little strange things about himself. But knowing what you know about him after you've seen this movie before, you start to notice little ticks in his behavior, little looks that he has in his eyes, like and the way that Anthony Perkins plays this with the way that his eyes just his eye. I'll say this: I think his eyes are the most important part of his performance, and the way that his eyes give away what he's thinking ties deeply into the themes of who he is as a person, I think, which is really interesting. And
I agree.
And the whole idea of him filling the role of his mother is a really interesting thing that goes on throughout. I don't want to dig too far into everything. I think I've done a decent job of glossing over the stuff that I want to talk about. But I'll open it up to you guys, and then I'll talk more if we don't cover it.
I like one of the other themes they set up, self-made traps.
Yes. Good one.
Because like I love that whole conversation between Norman and Marion when she realizes that she has to go back and set things right after seeing like his facade start to crack. She's like, I do not want to end up like him, where I'm just so stuck that I'm just driving myself mad. It's like I have to make do or make good on my life.
Yep. Both of those are perfectly strong, and go ahead.
So,
saving one.
kind of to build off of what you just said, actually, Marion and Norman play great foils to each other in the way that they both committed such. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
They both committed crimes for love, in essence.
Yeah, you're right. To a large extent.
Granted, Norman's crime was much greater than Marion's.
It wasn't murder,
but the fact that she did see not a path she can go down, because she wasn't a murderer, but the fact that in a way, I guess there is a little bit of dark reflection. That's what I think made her turn around, decide to go back and make right what she did.
Yeah,
and in a sense, Norman Bates is the darkest reflection of her possible, but because they both have the same motive. And I thought that was like very neat to watch the two characters interact. And I brought the scene earlier in the narrative. Their interactions and discussing in a very skip ahead to dialogue. The dialogue's so great in this scene because they're discussing deep themes without ever being heavy-handed about them in that one. And
most of the deep things that they get into are like, well, by the character's admittance, by accident. Like it's them, like her speaking a little too close to, like hitting a little too close to home and his relationship with his mother, and him having that like automatic reaction.
Yeah.
Yep. Her noticing it and trying to back off.
Yeah.
And
I'll save the one more part I have on that.
No, I mean, you guys are all right. It's all contained there. And the praise I'm going to heap on it is that they're all handled so seamlessly that it's so organic that they just emerge from the conversations, from the interactions of the characters, as we just said. But it's all like very significant. It's not glossing over anything. It presents something to you. And you're right. Like, I guess I'll have to say that upon repeated viewings, right? So like, yeah, I know it's a famous big twist, but once you know what it is, and upon rewatching it, you can notice the little subtle portrayals, the little subtle like hints and the playoffs between Marion and Norman and other characters as well. But I guess I'll save a chunk of it. We'll probably go to the next question. So I'll sort of cut it up. But of course, I agree with what you guys all just said. And I'm going to give it a strong 1 outright, always will and always was going to, because it's handled so well. And it's obvious, again, without being like, slapped in your face.
Yeah.
But it's so, like, again, intertwined throughout the entire movie that it's just perfectly, again, seated within, I guess I'll say.
I think that's the biggest thing, that it's not punching in the face with the themes, but they are there constantly.
They don't go away, but they're not, like, again, they're not
even in the
glaring thing.
Yeah, and we're talking about this in the beginning of the movie, when, you know, she goes to her job and she's working in the bank and she gets flirted with by the Texas millionaire and she gets a $40,000 slapped down on the table and he says, "Go bring this to the bank for me." There's kind of the idea of her being this kind of, I don't know what the right word for it is, like this kind of vehicle for the plot that's about to happen in front of her, and like this kind of like you're being led through the nose,
like the impetus for you
to like, what would you do as a person in this, you know, who had $40,000 slapped down in front of you and was treated like shit by this person? Would you take the money? Like that's kind of another thematic idea that I was kind of looking at.
And credit
while I was watching this movie.
Credit to her actress for like portraying that within 5-6 seconds of like a look.
A very short span of time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But going back to the idea of them not throwing in your face, like and going back to the discussion between Gently and Norman Bates' character, just forgot. The fact is, she comes to an ethical decision. Yeah, Anthony Perkins, ethical decision there, without having to spell out. You understand why she came to that conclusion, without having to lead you by the hand on her one by one decision making.
Yeah, it's not spelled out for you at all.
It's her recoiling, as you mentioned, Rich. It's her like. You're watching the process happen, but you're not privy to it. But you understand, like, you're sympathized with it.
Nevertheless, it's perfectly portrayed to you for the audience.
So again,
I love the following scene where it looks like she's still battling with herself over what to do, and the camera just pans slightly. She's got a full suitcase packed. She's already decided.
It's obvious
that money's hers.
Yep.
So
1 for sure.
One's all around, I think.
Indeed.
Okay, and Scott, on to you with antagonists.
All right, so as I just sort of briefly mentioned, it's sort of like, again, themes and antagonists, I think, are bound together to a certain extent. So yes, it's Norman Bates, I would say, but that's the, I guess, the corporeal antagonist, as sometimes Steve and I that sort of get into.
Sure.
And I was going to, like, I was wavering on bringing it up here, or in themes or here, So here it is. It's who you are sort of in the dark, sometimes almost literally. So Norman Bates had a traumatic experience, a past, and something happened to him, and which sort of broke him in a sense, or, altered his behavior in his lifestyle.
Yeah.
That now he feels like he can't help it. Like, this is what when he gets a guest that he's attracted to, it makes him flash back to his troubled childhood and bring out the monster in him. And he's the one, he commits the murders. He murdered his mother. He murdered Marion. And it's implied, I believe, at least 2 or 3 other possible passing guests. So, but he's not... It's almost the Addams Family joke, which I really love. Like, I'm a serial killer. They just look like everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
He's just a random desk clerk at a hotel. But at the same time, he's also vulnerable. Like, as you said, Andy Perkins portrays him so well that you see like so many sides of him, even though he is the actual murderer. There's a serial killer here in the plot of the film. But I still think... So it's sort of both. So I'll leave off with this. It's both him as the tangible killer, if you will, the psycho, the titular psycho, if you will. But also who everyone else is, and who you think you are, and what you're faced with as your choices are when pushed against the wall to a certain extent.
And don't forget Abigash.
He's an antagonist.
He killed.
That's true. He killed the PI who came to investigate him. So yeah, so we'll
Did
drink.
kill
yes.
Arbogast.
Yes. So by the way,
Arbogast.
You see, buddy.
if we haven't mentioned,
Yes.
Cheers.
Drinking
game, when you watch this movie,
Drink when they
every
mention
time somebody
Arbogast
says
name.
Arbogast.
So cheers. So that's pretty much my opening thoughts on antagonists. So take it away.
What I love about Anthony Perkins in this is that Norman Bates never feels threatening. He always feels like a weird guy.
Norman
Who
Bates
is-
never kills anyone.
Not
Well,
just
that's
not just a weird guy, a pitiably weird guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
He's
Which is a subtle but
awkward.
important difference.
He's whenever he's confronted with an alpha male type character, whether Arbogast
Or Sam.
and Sam Loomis,
Yeah.
and not the Sam Loomis you might be thinking.
Not
of.
that one you.
Not Dr. Loomis.
Not the one that comes to mind. But you're right
But-
about that.
He wasn't
Go
a
on.
doctor yet.
Go on.
But like he shrivels in front of them, and he only kills people in a sense ambush.
He kills people as someone else, though.
Well, yeah, but
He
the thing
kills
is-
people as his mother.
Yeah,
right?
he does. But when you see him, and going back to my favorite scene of this between Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins, you see him framed very bird-like with all of the birds of prey stuffed around him, and that's what he is.
He's nervous.
He's a bird.
Jittery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He swoops down and kills with his butcher knife talent.
With his talons.
But like, and he's not a Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers or anyone who's physically intimidating. In fact, the minute that he is,
You're right.
Sam Loomis takes him down in an instant, and he's arrested afterwards.
It's in the direct confrontation. Yeah, sure.
But like that makes him all the scarier. Not just because he's a normal person, but he's a person I don't think most people feel threatening.
He's unsuspecting, of course. Yeah.
If Janet Leigh his character was smarter, she would have left right after that situation.
Right.
But again, I felt like it was sort of like how much harm could he actually cause?
Yeah, he's almost disarming, like bumbling, like he's just eccentric, like guy who's like sort of like a shut-in, a hermit, to an extent.
Yeah.
So he's maybe strange but harmless, but he's the opposite of that.
And I think that's scarier to me. It's the person you're not expecting to come kill you, and
exactly.
especially when dressed like his mother.
Sure.
I don't have much to add to that. I think that's a very good description of him as an antagonist, and him as his mother as an antagonist as well. I'm gonna give it a 1 for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
1 from me.
Possibly the most iconic of all.
The most iconic
screen.
one. The most iconic
On
one.
screen,
I
on
can give it.
subs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on to me with the protagonists. I'm going to divide this up into the Sisters Crane.
Yep.
It's-
Great reference, by the way.
It's Janet Leigh plays is the protagonist for the first half, unsuspecting death, and her sister looks fairly similar.
I believe that.
They have the same dye job, which I thought was a nice touch.
But she takes over the role of the protagonist very smoothly. I understand her motivation as a caring sister trying to investigate the murder or the disappearance.
Yeah.
And like, I felt, and I understand it's the purpose of the film, that I felt closer to Janet Leigh's character because I saw more of her inner conflict.
Yeah.
I saw her, and like I understood her motivation, and I was rooting for her.
And you saw her brutal murder, which like strangely brings you closer to her.
That final
I don't
shot of
strangely,
her
man, like,
face is haunting. to
Yeah.
this day.
it's disturbing, but again, like artistically so, and which will come up in style. But I absolutely agree.
So, and I didn't feel like anything was like the flow was broken by the introduction of the sister. If they were going to pull off a twist like this, they pulled it off perfectly.
Yeah, I think it went well.
Now, here's the thing, right? As we alluded to earlier, the influence of this film is such that you've seen that, like, again, he invented this trope, sort of. Oh, my disappeared / murdered sister. Like, that's so cliche, but it wasn't at the time. And in the way Hitchcock did it, it made perfect sense. It wasn't bland or one-dimensional character.
I think what would also help too, that made it not out of left field, is that she mentioned, or Marion mentions her sister at the very beginning of the movie, and then and she's the first person that her boss decides to call when she goes missing.
Exactly, it's all perfectly set up. So, like I said, like in addition to the pacing and so forth, as you said, all the motivation and the character personality is there, like fast enough but not rushed, so that when Marion gets murdered and her sister is brought in to like investigate what's happened to her, it doesn't feel forced or shoehorned or anything like that. It's so fucking natural. And like, not that they switch places, but of course you're following her story, and she meets up with Marion's, lover, or, boyfriend. So that
BFF.
It all
just BF.
It all flows perfectly. And I think they do share the brothers, or the sisters Crane. Like it you've seen it handled poorly, but because in lesser talented hands, that's going to happen. But in this movie, it's perfect.
Yeah.
The only other thing I can think of that works with, I apologize for the tangent, Twin Peaks, when Laura Palmer's cousin.
Yep.
This was even far better than that, but it's hard.
Lynch took it from Psycho.
It could feel very soap opera-y. It doesn't here, and that's for what's a soap opera moment. It doesn't feel that way
because the narrative, sets everything up. Nothing is like out of dropped in or like plot hold or anything like that. So for all that,
by the time she shows up, you were almost expecting her to show up.
You're right. Like it's a natural progression.
Yeah.
So I have to.
I would have been surprised if she didn't show up.
Yeah, she never showed up in that movie. It wouldn't have made any sense.
Exactly.
Like, why the fuck did they introduce this character?
Exactly.
Yeah. So one's all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely one.
All right, Rich, on to you with supporting.
Well, I think you all know who my pick for best supporting character is.
I believe I do.
Arbogast.
Yep.
Arbogast. Drinks? Cheers.
He was a solid private investigator. Like as far as private investigating characters go, they usually have them as like, they come off as competent and then they make like one fatal mistake later on. I guess his only mistake was not having prior knowledge of the ending of the movie. That's
you're right. That's so fucking nice.
He just didn't know.
It's fucking amazing.
He didn't know that Norman Bates was a crazy motherfucker. Yeah. But that's not his. That goes
back to Ian's point about
underestimated. What he was dealing with.
As everyone else did.
I want to make a joke. He made a fatal mistake, but not because he did something stupid. He got killed for it, but he was doing a great job of being a PI and following up leads and investigating. And he ran up against a murderer who knew he was coming and decided to take him out, and did.
And you know what?
Loomis?
I think if he did not dress up as his mother, he wouldn't have gotten the drop on him. Because he was clearly confused.
He was expecting something else.
He was expecting Norman Bates to run out of there, not Norman Bates and drag. And then like that split second
of confusion off-putting move.
Caught him off guard.
Yep.
Can we call Norman Bates' mother a supporting character?
I was waiting for you to bring that up for sure. Yes.
I'm gonna
think
call
that's
it that.
Seriously.
That's amazing. That's an amazing, like, strange, just left field supporting character, but like so good.
Not left field. I think it stands, dude. Seriously, I think it's
I guess
legit.
as far as alters go, I guess they definitely
The boyfriend, whatever the hell his name was
Sam
fine.
Loomis.
Yeah, Sam. All I can remember was Loomis.
I love
Sam.
I love how they didn't turn him into the protagonist of the movie.
Yes,
Like he tried in certain ways to like be like the hero that comes in to save anything, and Lila was having none of that.
And she was like, "No, fuck
again,
you."
you've seen it before where that
Yeah.
happens, and
but
it's
also,
weak.
to his credit, because he goes straight to the base motel, and then after he tells her to stay, he comes back to tell her what he found out and to get her as backup
Yeah.
to go back and
Yeah.
take this guy
They
down.
make perfect
Anybody remember what the elderly couple in town, what their names were? Because they were great.
Sheriff.
the sheriff something and his wife. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter. Like they were there for a
But
couple
they were
scenes.
good. Like they were
They're fine.
perfect in their role, and like I thought that the supporting characters in this were just solid in and out, like all the way
Ooh.
through.
One thing I loved about the sheriff and his wife, because they were basically set up as necessary background information for,
Right.
to have the reveal
Yeah.
of Norman's
They knew
mother
that
being.
Norman's mother was.
But
yeah,
when she was about to say it, she got cut off,
yeah.
and they waited for the entire conversation
First
to go
of all,
around.
That's my one big complaint about this movie. They definitely should have been like, "Oh, she's been dead for a long time." As soon as they mentioned it was like 10 minutes later in the movie where he was finally like,
It was a
"Oh,
slight delay.
she's
reveal.
been dead for a
Sure.
long time."
Sure.
But at the same time,
It was
the
like,
sheriff
why
was-
didn't you tell them that immediately when they were telling you about this?
But at the same time, the sheriff was he was kind of humoring them up until that point.
Sort of. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Sure,
Like that's why it was dragged on for so long.
sure.
And
But I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
who can forget Dr. Sigmund Expository, who at the end gives a
Yeah, I knew you were waiting for that one.
huge speech.
So good.
But here's the
That
thing
was
is-
a long chunk of the conclusion that
Yes,
I completely
yeah.
forgot about.
but here's the thing: is while a lot of it is just expository, they do a couple of things that were interesting. With like, he's not a transvestite. He's like
taking out
one of the cops like throws that out like as kind of a derogatory
really
to
strangely, like a very strangely progressive
It did feel very progressive.
speech that he
Yeah.
gave.
Yeah, he leaned really heavily into the definition of
Yeah,
dissociative
he's like, you're
identity.
slapping a label on this
Yeah.
guy this person
Yeah.
that isn't quite applicable here, and I'll tell you why.
So
Refuse to like slap a
A broad brush kind of thing.
yeah. Like
Like, is
he
it-
painted him very specifically and like said what was going on with Norman Bates,
And the
as
wi-
opposed to like saying, "Oh yeah, this is just
Just with,
transsexual," like
yeah,
something that could have very easily, especially in that era.
it wasn't lazy, and that's what's really
Yeah.
important
and
about
Exactly.
this.
Yeah.
especially with the words. It's like, so is my sister? Did he kill my sister? Yes and no.
Mhm.
Like he was very emphatic
Mhm.
about making sure
There's
that
a
they
subtle
knew
difference
that there was a subtle
Yeah.
difference between Norman Bates and Norma Bates,
Yeah.
his other personality.
right.
Which I guess also should go to themes with that, but nonetheless.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. So I'm going to give a call back to the It's a Wonderful Life episode that we did. Like the specter of Norma Bates is sort of like its own secondary character
Mhm.
as applied,
Sure.
as filtered through the persona that Norman channels. So for all that and everything we just said, it's got to be a damn strong one. And like you said, all the other side
Strong one
characters-
for me. Yeah.
all the other side
Sure.
characters
Strong one.
were damn well portrayed as well.
I would like to also put the swamp that he dumps all of his problems into as another secondary character.
His go-to.
Everyone wishes they had a tar thing.
tar
like
gun.
that,
I wish I had a supporting swamp.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
And the Oscar goes to
Steven,
Yes.
dialogue.
Dialogue. It's good.
It's better than
It's my
good.
dialogue about this dialogue. No, yeah, you're right. It's fantastic dialogue. As far as
It's better than bad.
Hitchcock movies
It's
go
good.
that I've seen, this might be the top of the heap, and they're all good. But this is incredibly good dialogue throughout. I think within the first 5 minutes, I said oh, this is very good dialogue.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and it didn't disappoint the rest of the way throughout. You know, I've seen this movie several times, and this is probably the first time I've looked at it with like a very critical eye, and the dialogue really holds up
Exactly.
throughout the movie, and it's just solid, well done, like thoughtful dialogue that really makes the movie. This movie would be good even without really good dialogue, I
But
think.
it elevates it. Yeah.
But the fact that it has very good dialogue is the reason it's number 14 on this on the
AFI.
top 100 list, the AFI top 100 list. So I don't know if there's I don't have any specific lines in mind.
There's too many.
I don't know if you guys do, but
No, because I do it a disservice.
it's just very good throughout, and it never disappointed me.
See, going off of that, I don't have specific lines that I love, but just specific sections of the movie
Right.
exactly.
where these conversations were happening.
Her final line is great. And again, I keep harping on the one scene. I think is the
I think
Anthony
it's the best scene in
Perkins
the
and
movie.
Janet Leigh
When they're in the
having that discussion.
parlor.
when they're in the parlor, yeah. I think it's the best scene in the
Yes.
movie.
I agree with that.
That is perfect dialogue. Here's the thing: this movie's good, but it's sometimes great, and that's my final assessment of it.
I think I would go one step further. This movie is great, but it's sometimes
Transcendent. Booyah.
amazing word
Yeah.
for it.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I agree.
I agree.
That's the thing, and I'll bring it back to something we said earlier, and this has come up on other masterpieces specifically that we have done, where you can see the influence and understand why, but it seems dated. This does not seem dated at all, and in fact,
No.
it's probably some of the best dialogue that still stands, like compared to contemporary things
Yeah.
to this day. And I think it's the best praise I can give it. And yes, the parlor scene is probably the standout, but there are so many other examples as well, like when the PI is
Arbogast.
is interviewing or
Questioning.
talking.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Arbogast.
Arbogast. I'll give a drink in a sec when I'm done. But like either way, I'm just saying like both of those are the pillars that elevate this movie beyond like what you might expect and remember, and it still stands as its time. And as you said,
Yeah.
Steve-O, that's why it's fucking number 14. Like
There's a
it
reason for
still
it.
rings true. So that's it.
Honestly,
One's all around.
I would definitely put this movie above Raging Bull.
Fair enough.
I'm still I'm holding a torch against Raging Bull.
All right.
I agree.
All right. But
All
either
right,
way,
yeah, so it's a one all around
One.
right on dialogue.
yes.
Okay, and Scott, on to you with style.
Wee. I mean, again, like this is so fucking famous. It's so influential, and it's so not so obvious, but upon watching it, like you could just see why. You could see its influence everywhere in every movie, at least horror movie, and many other movies you've seen since this movie came out in 1960, I believe. So it's just so perfect. The fucking lighting. I'll leave one thing for you, Steve-O, specifically, but
oh my god.
the shots,
The
the
fucking
framing,
lighting.
the lighting, because it's in black and white, and because the tricks and just the know-how that Hitchcock had to get amazing shots out of it within the framework of the narrative for the characters, for that scene, like you said, like with the owls, like just the perfect noir shadow behind him and like the best framing and so many other things. Other scenes were like that as well. It's just so goddamn classic, and it's so good. I can't speak enough about it. It's the hardest of all ones, even amongst all the other praise you've already heaped upon this movie.
So hard.
It's just so glaringly good, I guess. That's pretty much all I can say. You guys can pick out other details or expand upon it as such.
I have one thing to say, and I'll give it on to you. How can someone play with shadows and lighting like this? It's phenomenal. We were just saying, like, this is a fantastic shot. This is a
This is
fantastic
one thing
shot.
that stops
This is a
me in my
fantastic shot.
All jokes stopped when we saw a shot, and which were many.
Yeah.
Right towards the end, there's a shot of Norman Bates at the swamps, and he's just bathed
Covered
in
in
shadows
shade.
Yeah.
aside from his eyes.
Yeah.
And it is...
And some of the contours are the size of his face.
Yeah,
too.
it's just...
It's just
It's like,
haunting.
it was like somebody some artist came in and like painted the shadows in
Yep.
the way that you needed them.
Yep.
Like Sin City, I think,
Someone tried it.
tried it, but it was with CG and
Yeah.
like other effects. Like he somehow did this with
Without CG,
Yeah.
just knowing how to do
Brilliance.
it. Yeah, exactly.
The shower scene, the eye hole
Yep.
like scene. Oh my god! Like there's so many scenes that are just classic film. You've seen people try to do this well, and they have failed. It's like, man, this guy did this in 1960 and nailed it as hard as he could. What I also have to mention, obviously, is the soundtrack and just the amazing music that goes throughout this movie is incredible. And like a lot of the movies that we watched recently, I felt like I've been slipping because I haven't noticed the music in them as much.
Because they were weaker than this.
Yeah.
But I
This
see a
one's
movie.
amazing.
I see a movie like this, and I'm like, oh, maybe not. Like this movie is memorable for its music, and the music in this really elevates the movie, as well as the cinematography. I'm not saying that it is a bigger portion of the movie than that or anything like that, but like, there are certain films that you see that the music is just so good
An integral part
and
of, yeah.
makes the feeling of the movie that much better. And this is one of those films.
It heightens every scene
and I have
in
to
every
give,
best way.
I have to, because Chris isn't here. I have to give a shout out to him, of course. Chris,
Begrudgingly, sure.
I know you love the music. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the composer.
Herman something. Bernard
Yeah.
Herman, maybe. I can't remember the term right now. So you know how like UR dash like the example of whatever?
Mhm.
This is dash harwar, which is horror plus noir. And the like the like origin of it.
Sure.
So that's
sure.
what I'm labeling that, and I'm giving style a rocket of a knife of a 1 to the
Super
chest.
strong one for
Yes.
style. Yeah.
So I just have a quick metaphor that we've been using quite a bit. I'll
Okay.
be back. This is a hearty stew of style.
Yep.
It's got all the right,
No, I like it.
the vegetable spices.
In the right ratio.
Yeah, this is a heck of a stew.
It is very good.
Superb.
Any last thoughts?
Well, you have to go on recommendation.
I know, but
No,
No,
style.
In terms
I
of
don't
style,
think
no,
anything
yeah,
about
ones,
style.
hard ones.
I mean, there's like
hard ones.
like
We're
nothing
all
much-
hard
yeah.
for this one.
there's nothing much that I can add except for just the way the characters are portrayed throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Absolutely agreed.
Okay, so recommendations? Yes.
yes,
Recommend.
Yep.
Arbogast.
Watch it again for the first time or watch it for the 100th time. It's still a fucking
Yeah,
great movie.
listen, I don't give a shit who you are. Like, normally I'm like, oh, if you like this, you'll like this movie. No, fuck you. Watch this movie. It's fucking good.
This is at least like the 4th or 5th time I've seen it, and I'd always catch something new with each new
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
each viewing.
Exactly.
This has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's a damn tragedy.
It should be better than that, yeah.
Anyone who gave this a negative review should lose their
Viewer's license.
Turn in your critic's
No,
card.
they should spend a night in Bates Motel.
Yeah.
So, now that you say that,
10s all around.
it's 10s all around, of
10s all
course.
around.
Now that you say that,
Yes.
is this a 10 movie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Here's the thing.
I have to ask the question.
I know.
Prior to having watched it again,
Uh-huh.
I might have
I wasn't
said
sure.
a
Yeah,
9, something like that. I was going to give it a high score.
You're like, eh.
But watching it, it's solid from beginning to end. And not only like, narratively, which is what we mostly base our work upon,
Right.
character-driven, it's just the level of detail that goes into this elevates it to a masterpiece.
I'm gonna come. Yeah. Well, somewhat thunder, but it's a mother killing masterpiece.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make up a new XP for a curse.
I'm going to start saying that.
All right. Well, yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. To answer your question, Steve-O, it is a 10 movie. All right.
Yeah.
10. Yeah, I think it is. Having thought about it, I was perhaps going to say I might give this like a 9.5 if I was, if I had
Doing it
my
arbitrarily.
druthers. But like, I don't think that I would. I think this is.
Where does it lose points? Nowhere.
I think this is as close to a perfect movie as most movies have gotten.
Well, this is recognized.
I'm not saying it's the best movie ever, but it's pretty close.
What time are we at?
45.
All right.
You gonna throw a grenade in here?
Hitchcock, Kubrick, go.
Which one's better, or like what?
Kubrick.
Those are just two names of directors you just said.
No, I said yeah.
Who's better at cinematography?
Yeah,
Here's the
cinematography.
thing. So Kubrick's better, but Kubrick had the luxury of seeing what Hitchcock did and fucking him trying to improve upon it.
It's a chicken and the egg kind of question, I think.
And the other thing is, Hitchcock made a more. This is a very difficult thing to say. I think Hitchcock makes a more complete movie than Kubrick. Kubrick's movies are very complete. I don't mean that as in any way denigrating a Kubrick movie, but I think that Hitchcock fills his movie out more than Kubrick does to a minuscule, slightly better way. And that's probably just
that's just like your opinion, man.
Better. Kubrick, I love him. I love all Kubrick movies, but I also love all the Hitchcock movies that I've seen, and especially Psycho. I think this is a great movie, and I think it's better than any Kubrick movie. Oh man, I don't know. I might like Clockwork Orange more.
All right,
it's tough.
It's a rabbit hole, but
it's a much longer conversation than we have time for.
I'll answer it this way: Hitchcock is Marion, and then Kubrick is Lila. So they sort of follow each other.
Okay. I asked that specifically because we did Shining last year.
That's true. We gave it a 10, I believe.
Psycho.
Yes.
And I do love Shining. I think Psycho's better than Shining. But I think Clockwork Orange is better than both.
It's a harsh question, but it might make an episode unto itself. But I answered it the way I answered it. I think that's funny, and I think it still stands.
Oh, my thoughts on the Kubrick versus Hitchcock debate?
Yep.
I don't have a clear memory of most Hitchcock movies, but if I'm judging it based off of this one film, I'm going to have to give him the edge.
Nice.
Shining was my favorite horror movie. Having rewatched Psycho, I think I now spot, it takes top spot.
Yeah,
that's fair, dude. I get you.
They're different. They're completely different beasts.
Yeah, they are.
But I know it's just something. It's something about watching this again. And going in with a critical eye, it gave me an appreciation for it that I didn't have prior. So, and I loved Psycho before, but I didn't necessarily. I wasn't adult enough to
have the chops to do what we're doing. Yeah, no, I get it for sure. I hear you.
All right. Any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man.
Yeah. I'm Jonathan Ian Menzer, here with Rich Perry.
Arbogast.
Stephen Ramosi.
Arbogast.
And Scott Thurlow.
And check into our Bates Hotel. See you next time.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
MOTSterpiece Theater. MOTSterpiece Theater.